coming to you live. It's In the Know with Mo. And now, here's your host, Mo Vela.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for being with us this week. It's great to have you with us. I'm Mo Vela, the host, your host, I should say. We have an incredible show for you this week. I am coming to you from the heart of Los Angeles, in Hollywood, no less, where it is sunny and beautiful and the weather is perfection. So I'm grateful for that. As always, we're going to start with my moment of truth, MOEMENT, of course. And this week, I wanted to focus on the midterm elections because I think that I see some trending that I wanted to speak about on my moment of truth. I think we should be careful not to believe everything we hear in the media, number one, about a red wave and all of these predictions about red waves. I think that my moment of truth is never underestimate the power of women. With the Roe v. Wade decision, I think they have inadvertently and maybe intentionally have empowered women to stand up and say, not my body, not my body. You don't have any right to do anything or have a say on anything that is done with my body. And we're seeing that so far in these primaries. If that trend continues, I don't think we're going to have a red wave. Maybe I'm just being hopeful, maybe a little naive, but that's my moment of truth. Can't believe everything we read. Can't believe every poll. I believe in the power of all the women in this country when they stand up in November and let. Thank you, Mark Grimaldi, the greatest producer in America. Happens to be my producer and Leslie Marshall's producer. And thank you, Leslie, of course, for giving me the opportunity to have this podcast and radio show In the Know with Mo. So let's get to our guest, Tim Zenk. We've had Tim on before. This time we get to have him back at a very, very exciting, transformative time on the area of his expertise. He is one of our nation's foremost experts, global experts, actually. I didn't mean to limit you, Tim, just to the boundaries of the United States, but a globally renowned and acclaimed expert on renewable energy, in particular hydrogen and methane and other carbon emissions that he is so knowledgeable about. And we're going to talk to him. Of course, he's the president, by the way, of Molecule LLC. I love this. I love how you describe Molecule. It's where policy, finance, and tech intersect. I like that. I love that. It really helps me understand, right? And you know what I love is that I want to mention this again because we said it the first time you're on, but I just think you deserve all kind of kudos for being the founder of the Washington Green Hydrogen Alliance, right? And a clean fuel Washington. So important. People like you who have, we're way out in front on this topic when Al Gore barely made it cool. Remember? Our mutual old boss. Yes. Our mutual old boss. We must remind our audience that Tim and I did both work for Vice President Gore and the Clinton administration, and Tim's been in the trenches on clean energy. Again, I wasn't joking, since before it was cool and before it really became a cause, if you will, and way before, Tim, the exigency of what we are confronted with now. So, Tim, welcome back. Good to have you, brother. So listen, we've got so much to talk about. I want to really take the entire time to talk about the Inflation Reduction Act. That thanks to the Democratic Party, thanks to the Democratic leaders in the Senate, and thanks to Nancy Pelosi and the House Democrats, and then of course, thanks to our President Joe Biden, they made this happen. And you know what, Tim? I hope you agree with me. Let's give a shout out to Senator Manchin, because absolutely, you know what? That was not an easy negotiation and compromise for him. And if you haven't worked in Washington, do you agree with me? If you haven't worked in Washington, I don't think you understand how hard it is when you come from a coal state, a coal producing state, to compromise on climate change legislation. What are your thoughts on that? Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think so too. I thought so too, and it wouldn't have happened without him, without his being an honorable man, and never walking away and saying I'm not going back to that. And so I thought it was fair and appropriate for us to give him kudos today to start this whole discussion off. But really, kudos go to a lot of people, including people like you, Tim. Honestly, because when you started your organizations in Washington, when you were part of our Gore team, and you were fighting with Al Gore on these issues, you guys are the ones that set the foundation for all of these steps forward and these accomplishments. So let's get started on. I love this article. Was it written by you or somebody? I forgive me for not knowing who wrote this, but 5 ways the Inflation Reduction Act will fight climate change. Was that you? Okay. But I want to discuss this because I want to go one at a time and get your insight. Because listen, here's the deal. When there's, I don't know how many pages are on this particular piece of legislation. I'm guessing it was multiple hundreds like normal, right? Maybe even over 1,000. Um, we, the average citizen, we, the average American, and we, the average global citizen, we have no clue what's on page 820. Do you know what I'm saying? So I want to spend this whole show going, one concept at a time and seeing if you can enlighten us, educate us, so that we might know how we can be supported, right? And participate and be helpful. So let's start with the first one. Huge investments in clean energy. What does that mean? What the hell is that? What are we looking at here? I understand. I don't need dollar figures necessarily. I don't want to put you on the spot, but what type of investments are we talking about here that are going to be funded through this legislation? Oh, what does that mean? Manufactured or produced here in the U.S.? Oh, wow, that's amazing. Isn't that amazing? Now, does this also include electric vehicles, investments in electric vehicle manufacturing as well? So,
barrel because they have all the minerals. We need to be in control of our own energy destiny.
Wow. So I think then, since we're going into our first break, I wanted to just see if you agree with the word I keep hearing to describe the Inflation Reduction Act. I keep hearing the word transformative. Would you agree with that assessment?
Transformative is kind of not even as important of a word as I would use. I would say this is one of those laws that will have decades and decades and decades of impact to our lives and to our families' lives.
Wow, not to mention to the planet. And so life-altering consequences, in other words.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. Well, we're going to go to our first break. As you can tell, you don't want to go anywhere because we're just getting started. We're going to come right back. There are 4 other ways that people seem to agree that the Inflation Reduction Act will fight climate change. Stay with us.
Whoa, a new digital music player. Thanks, Mom.
Oh, I'm glad you like it.
God, I went
because
back to
I
my
can't
old
wait to
habits.
toss the big stereo. And now that we got your dad that big HD TV he wanted, we can throw out our old TV too.
Hold up.
Tim,
You can't just
like
throw
this.
out electronics.
You're not supposed to do this?
Really?
Well,
They need to be recycled or donated.
And how would
it's
we
the
do
Texas
that?
part of
It's
me,
so
right?
easy,
Like
Mom.
you go,
Today, recycling
Yeah,
electronics
I hear
is
ya.
just as easy as
stay
buying
right
it.
there. Don't go anywhere.
GreenerGadgets.org has all the info. We just enter our zip code to find a certified recycling center nearby. There are thousands of them, and new ones are being added all the time. Some of our local stores are even
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to In the Know with Mo. I'm Mo Host. We are really, really lucky this week to have Tim Zenk, one of the world's foremost experts on renewable energy and clean energy. He has been on the front lines of fighting climate change since we met 20-something years ago, but we were both in middle school. Let's be very clear about this, Tim. We were in kindergarten. I'm sorry, we met in kindergarten 20-something years ago, fighting climate change, no less.
Exactly.
So anyway, it's great to have you back, Tim. You're always such a wealth of knowledge and insight for us. So we were talking about the 5 ways that seem to be the consensus, at least 5 ways. There are probably 500 ways that the Inflation Reduction Act is going to fight climate change. And as we said before the break, transformative, life-altering, impactful. I love what you said. This legislation will impact people's lives for decades. That's an amazing statement. That is very powerful. So again, kudos to all of from the president to the senators and the members of Congress and who made it happen for us, and all of you like Tim who have been fighting for this for decades. So I want to move. The first one was these huge investments in climate. In clean energy, and thank you for walking us through that. What are we talking about, just before we leave that particular segment or topic, what are we talking about here? $1 trillion total? I mean,
well, the incentives are, they are around, if you include the tax incentives over the decades, yes, you're talking trillions, $1 trillion.
Wow, that's.
But that's what's needed to make this transition.
I agree. We're like, we are in the ditch.
Exactly. We're now the leading country in the world
Contributor.
addressing the issue of climate change, and it will
addressing,
put the rest of the world on notice that we're here to play.
Well, so let's go to that one next then. That's another one of the ways that this bill is being seen as being transformative and ways that it fights climate change. Let's talk about that. So what is the message we just sent to the world? I mean, I think there's the obvious one, right? We're serious, we care, right? But how will that impact anything in everyday terms, right? For those of us that are lay people, how does that translate into anything more than just we care?
The world knows the next manufacturing sort of boom is going to be on the renewable energy side. All the investment banks around the world, all the countries and nations and leaders of the world know that that's where the next pool of jobs are coming from. So you're either in the game or you're out of the game.
Gotcha.
The United States has made an announcement that we're going to lead, and you all better catch up. So that's why it matters to us. It matters to our people and our workers and our industries.
So in essence, we raised the bar.
We did.
And so now because let's talk about this aspect of it, because I don't think a lot of people understand. You and I are very blessed to have worked inside at the highest levels. And so we were intimately aware and familiar with this dynamic, but I don't think the average American is, that there's a very strong competitive spirit when it comes to international relations, right? So I think that's kind of what you're alluding to, right? So we are now saying, we just raised the bar to here. France, Germany, the UK, you got to keep up with us, or you're going to be viewed as, the silver medal winner and not in the contention for gold. Is that about how it works?
And Mo, imagine if you're President Biden and you walk into a NATO meeting and you've just accomplished such an enormous feat, and you need something done in other parts of the world. Or exactly. Now we have the clout to say we're walking our talk, right? And that puts a lot of pressure on other leaders to sort of either follow or get on the boat.
Okay, that is a very fascinating perspective. So it's much more than a message. It's a rallying cry. It's keep up with us. It's frankly, there's a power dynamic to it.
The world expects the United States to lead on these things. And for the last decade or so, we haven't been leaders. We've been struggling politically internally. And so when that vacuum was created by our inability to get our act together around climate, the rest of the world sort of put the brakes on it too, because the United States wasn't at the table.
Well, and we weren't putting pressure, I guess, right?
Yep.
And didn't Donald Trump take us out of the Paris Accord?
Yes, he did.
Okay. So we were doing stupid shit like that. Excuse me. Sorry. That was probably an FCC violation. Sorry. Stupid stuff. Stupid stuff like that. And so, I see what you're saying. So that clearly is another way, very big way, that this legislation will fight climate change.
Yeah, it gives the president an incredible portfolio of soft power, and that is from a diplomatic standpoint, it gives the president and the United States tremendous credibility.
Yeah, and I think we forget about that. We take it for granted. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
We do.
Because to your point, we really haven't had much in the last 10 years to do. And I just want to point out to our audience, I did point to this muscle. I know it's not a lot, but I promise you this bill's giving Joe Biden a lot more muscle than this little bicep. I realized I pointed to my bicep. I was like, that's not a good example of muscle. But to the muscle that this bill now gives the president in his international negotiations and
absolutely
international relations efforts, and Secretary Blinken, of course, as well. I don't think we can exaggerate what a difference it makes on the international front. So again, I just want to go back real quickly because we're about to approach our second break. But before we move to a whole nother third way, we're going to do that right after we come back. But as we go into this break, Tim, I'm just very quickly, are we talking about tax credits? Are there funds that manufacturers can actually get grants? Is there a granting program in this at all?
Absolutely. There's a number of grant programs to retool our manufacturing system, to encourage domestic production of all of the things we need to be
in the whole ecosystem.
Yes.
Oh, that really makes my whole day, honestly, because I'm involved in so much of that kind of startup world and that retooling, rebranding, reformatting of companies. And I wasn't aware until you just said that there are grants available that are going to be there are going to be grants available, I should say, in the near future. So that is great news. And of course, tax credits, tax incentives, everything possible, right, that the federal government can offer. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. And domestic and sort of domestic production credits, so incentives for domestic production for using U.S. manufactured goods, those sorts of things that create jobs here at home.
I like how Donald Trump has always claimed America first, but clearly Joe Biden practices what he preaches, because he put America first. We'll be right back with Tim Zenk. Don't go anywhere. We got much more to discuss.
If you're worried your phone may be struggling, remember, you don't have to be there to be there.
You could say, how are you, or get a fake tattoo. You can ask with an app if it works for you. You could write them a text or knit them a sweater. If you can't be together, you could write them a letter. Whatever gets you talking. Whatever gets you talking. You could chat on the game, kick off your flip-flops. You can ask on your couch while you binge watch. However you do it, you gotta ask a friend. And if they don't share, you can ask again. Whatever gets you talking. Whatever gets you talking.
Reach out to a friend about their mental health. Learn how you can help at seizetheawkward.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and the JED Foundation.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to In the Know with Mo. I'm Mo Bella, your host. I think I might have just jumped in too early, but regardless, welcome back again. So welcome back 17 times. How's that? It's great to have all of y'all with us this week at In the Know with Mo. I'm Mo Vela, your host. Our guest this week is Tim Zenk, one of the world's most highly acclaimed and respected clean energy experts. And what a time to have him on with us. We are discussing the Inflation Reduction Act. But honestly, I think that name does not really reflect truly what this is, this transformative legislation that we're discussing. I think they should have called it Save the Planet Act.
Yeah.
But that's just me. Because that's really what it's geared to do. It's also, Let's Create American Jobs Act. It's also right?
Yep.
I mean, it's so much more, right? It's like We're All in This Together Act. So there were a number of things that could have been called, but the Inflation Reduction Act is what it was officially called. So, Tim, before we leave this topic, because I want to make sure our audience understands the opportunities that are being created as a result of this, right? Not just the ways that it fights climate change, but I'm an entrepreneur and a businessman and an investor, and I'm on a business reality show, TV show, and to me, I also love to talk about business opportunities, and we just barely started touching on that before the break.
Right.
Because what I just heard from you was there's grant money in here, there's public-private partnership probably opportunities, there's the federal government is going to invest, right? They're going to partner, there are tax credits, tax incentives for manufacturers, for tech companies, right, that are coming up with ways to manufacture and service this massive ecosystem that will now be front and center. Is that a fair assessment?
By this act it touches the entire economy, everywhere that we need to decarbonize, from renewable fuels, which is a critical component, to electrification of vehicles, to sustainable aviation fuels, to the production of green hydrogen to replace bad hydrogen called, that's produced from natural gas. Every step of the economy, this has an incentive or a program established for domestic production of those goods here in a new, clean way.
Which is just amazing. I mean, that is just amazing. I mean, there's no other way to just describe how exciting this is. If we wasn't so serious, I'd make it sound like a football victory, but you know what I'm saying? But it's an exigent situation. So I don't want to minimize or diminish the exigency, but it is exciting too, because there are a lot of opportunities, and I want our listeners and our viewers to take part in that and find ways to participate and be a part of that ecosystem and, you know, this incredible American experiment, right? Because we're not going to let our democracy die. I think there are too many of us that are, blood.
That's right.
Blood and sweat and tears, but we believe in this democracy, and this is a great example of why this democracy works, this legislation. So I want to move to a third way that I think there's a consensus that this legislation will fight climate change, and that is that somehow we're going to be able to now keep our climate change goals within reach. And so let's start with, what are some of those goals? I mean, is it simply cutting down carbon emissions, or are there others?
So, yeah, President Biden, when he ran for office, established a campaign goal of reducing carbon emissions by 50% by 2035, excuse me. This legislation gets us 40% of the way there, with the other 10% achievable via administrative actions, meaning under control of the White House, under control of the president. So, yes, he's achieved an amazing accomplishment. Most people rolled their eyes when they heard that during the campaign, because it's a big objective, right? To reduce 50% of your carbon emissions by 2035 is huge. So this legislation gets us there.
You know, what do you say? But I don't want to get off of that climate goal and how this legislation helps us take. By the way, that was so insightful to hear that this would get us 40% of the way there, and 10% can be done through administrative mechanisms that the president has the power to do through either his office or the agencies in the federal government, like EPA or Interior probably, but mostly EPA. But that's great to know. But before we leave this, what would you say? I just got a text yesterday from somebody, literally, how timely was this text before my conversation with you, that said, can you tell the president, I love how people think I can just pick up the phone and call him directly, but can you just tell the president that maybe we should stop being so worried about the climate and worried about inflation, or the economics that we're confronted with, and that, even I went to the grocery store this past week. I was visiting friends in San Diego, and bacon was, instead of $3.99, was now $7.99, right? And I even saw some pack for $9.99. And I've just seen that all down the aisle last week. And so I saw it myself, and I don't want to diminish that concern, because the average working class American is struggling. I mean, they're having to cut back. We're having to maybe consume less. So what do you say to them that we're focused on something like this, and some of them feel it's at the expense of their pain and misery on a daily basis?
Well, this White House can walk and chew gum at the same time, okay? And this legislation, if you look at it, drives the cost of adopting these new technologies at par with existing fossil-intensive systems. For example, changing your household heating system and using a heat pump will save you a substantial amount of money. Moving to an electric personal vehicle will, the total cost of ownership of owning an electric vehicle is substantially lower than owning a gas-powered vehicle. And we've seen that the energy insecurity issues really do have an impact on Americans, don't they? Since Russia went to war with Ukraine. Yes. So all of those elements, and I could go on, and I know we have a time issue, but this will lower the costs of almost every piece of this economic transition the nation is under, and it will have an impact on lowering the cost of goods and services in the economy, because don't think that those goods aren't impacted by the impacts of climate change, because they are. And so, one of the reasons we're struggling is because many of the food products that we're eating, for example, are impacted by the cost of climate change. And so we're paying for it either on that end or this end. And this bill really addresses many of those aspects in this economy and comes at it in a very sort of, very logical for a change way.
Yeah. Well, and what a brilliant reminder for all of us, right? Because to those skeptics, I think that most people, the average person, and I put myself in that category, I think we forget that the cost of goods, services, food, these consumption products that we consume on a daily or weekly basis are impacted by the turning a blind eye to to climate change,
sure.
Right? And so I think we just forget that, Tim. And I think most people, it's kind of hard to connect those dots. Maybe that's a good one, right? How would you say the best way to correlate those two things is in a nutshell?
Well, I think the best example is electric vehicles. Yes, they cost a little more to purchase, but the Congress just put in place a $7,000 tax credit to buy down that differential between a gas-powered vehicle and an electric vehicle. And we know that once they get in that vehicle, that the total cost of ownership is less. Yeah. So that is a great example of how it's helping Americans make the transition and pay less. For example, in Washington State, if you're to buy an e-gallon of gasoline, it's 80 cents per gallon versus $5 a gallon for fossil fuel gasoline.
Come on, that is
huge.
As we say in a business, that's on the bottom line.
Yep.
I mean, that's what is that? $4 and change.
Yeah.
That can go toward your kids' after-school program or swim meets or whatever, right? So you can invest that extra $4.20. It adds up, right? When
does.
You put it in that context. Well, that is a brilliant example, and I thank you for sharing that with us. We will be back for our last segment with Tim Zenk. I am sitting on my hands, so y'all all know, because I don't want to do this again. So I'm sitting on my hands. We'll be back right after the break with Tim Zenk. We got a couple more ways this legislation that we want to discuss is fighting climate change, so don't go anywhere. Now I'm learning to do it with.
Hi, it's Practical Polly's radio show. If you're just figuring out that healthier cooking oils are better than solid fats, you may be asking, now what am I going to do with all these tubs of lard? Ever had one of those moments when your favorite skinny jeans feel too tightly tailored? Generously apply lard to your hips and thighs and those fancy pants will slide on like a dream. Or here's a family-friendly idea. How about making your yard into a lard fun park? Frost your driveway with a nice thick coating and give those kiddos a downhill thrill no matter what time of year. Having a bad hair day? Yep. A little lump of lard can tame your flyaways in a jiffy. So there's no need for that lard to go to waste or to your waste. But get your best heart-healthy trade-up with healthier oils like canola, olive, or other vegetable oils, which can actually lower your chances for heart disease. Now that's a tip worth keeping for life. Learn more at heart.org/facethefats. Canola Info is the national supporter of the American Heart Association's Face the Fats campaign.
Welcome back to In the Know with Mo. I'm Mo Vela, your host. We're in our last incredible segment now with Tim Zenk. He's absolutely amazing. We're learning so much from him and gaining so much insight on the Inflation Reduction Act and the ways that everyone seems to believe and are confident it will fight climate change. So Tim, because I don't want to run out of time and I don't want people to write me ugly notes and say, you didn't get all 5, you just did 3. So let me get to those 2 and then we'll have a free-for-all here on just climate change in general. But so a third way, this is an important one because I'm not entirely sure all of us fully understand what the hell methane emissions are. So it's projected to curb methane emissions. What the hell is a methane emission and why is that important?
Methane is a very dangerous greenhouse gas that is much stronger than typical greenhouse gases, and it causes climate change in a nutshell. And so our natural gas supply systems are old and antiquated, and they leak. And so there's a carrot and stick approach in this legislation that basically tells the purveyors of those systems that they can be incentivized to clean up, or they'll be fined. And it's a very effective method to reduce emissions, and it's something that the industry actually is very supportive of.
That's good. Now, so in other words, it puts some teeth into this.
Yes, and so not only are we incentivizing them to fix and repair their systems through grants and funding opportunities, but we're also saying that if you don't do that, then it's going to cost you a lot of money.
Before I forget, I meant to ask this in an earlier segment. By some chance, is there any aspect of this bill that provides funding or support for the retraining and new skills required for coal miners?
Senator Manchin included a large section in there for for not just coal workers, but fossil fuel workers. So people in refineries. Exactly.
Okay. Now that means a lot to me, because when I was in the Clinton administration, when you and I were in the Clinton administration, remember we did the Welfare to Work Act. And I thought that one of the most effective aspects of that was that you can't just say, I'm going to take this away from you, or I'm going to discontinue your way of life or your income streams, and not, on the other hand, say, but here we're going to train you in a new tech field, or we're going to provide you with learning the skills so that you don't miss a beat.
Absolutely.
Right? So from coal maybe to wind, or coal to solar, or coal to whatever.
Those and those jobs are very transformational too. They're cleaner, they're healthier.
Yeah.
They're union jobs. In the case of this act, we incentivize the use of these labor standards that increase unionization, which of course has been near and dear to the president's heart for a long time. And I think all that's good for American workers.
I do too. And, on that note, I don't think we can overlook the fact that that the fossil fuel industry, especially coal, has a very, very, very negative impact on the health of coal miners.
Yes.
And I think people just gloss over that. So that alone, to me, would make this bill, again, impactful and worthy if it's going to save some lives and improve the health of thousands of people who do those jobs.
And Mo, one of the things they did is they closed the gap on the black lung issue associated with coal miners in the bill that was near and dear to Senator Manchin's heart, and sort of finally funded that effort so that coal miners that are leaving the business today are protected in their health care.
Oh, that makes me even happier. I'm very moderate, as you know, and these are, to me, very centric, right? American-centric issues. Yes, I want to save the planet, and yes, I want to fight climate change, but I think you have to do these things in a very balanced and respectful way, and a compassionate way, frankly. So the last consensus way everyone seems to believe this legislation is going to fight climate change is through environmental justice. Okay, now let's just go to square one here. What does that mean, environmental justice? What does that mean?
So I'll let the environmental justice people provide their own definition. My definition is, I'm a working person. I'm a baggage handler at SeaTac Airport.
Right.
I live near the airport. I am impacted by substantial emissions from aviation and from trucking and from diesel particulate matter in my neighborhood because I live near the airport. I can't afford to live anywhere else because of my income, and so I'm impacted from an environmental justice standpoint because of my economic category, where I live, where I work, and what I do. And so the idea here is to clean up the environments that these people live and work in so that they can raise families in a healthful way near airports, roads, and areas where these emissions are causing people substantial health
And
problems.
so this legislation has components in place, I take it, that will do just that.
Well, sort of, it's at its core, right?
Yeah.
So if you reduce the impacts of carbon in our fuels, you move to renewable fuels, you use sustainable aviation fuels, it's inherent that you reduce those harmful emissions as well.
Okay, so one of the results or ramifications of all of the initiatives and opportunities in this legislation should and will result in a more environmentally just country.
And it's codified in law that it is a requirement of the department to make that an objective and a transparent objective of the program. So it's not like we just say it, we have to
So
do
there
it.
are repercussions, in other words, if you don't participate or abide. That's important to know, and that's very helpful for you to share with us. Thank you so much. Now, by the way, before we leave the topic of environmental justice, I think that's something that's very often overlooked, and you please correct me if I'm wrong. I may be wrong, but if I remember correctly in some of my past discussions, when it comes to environmental justice and these neighborhoods and zip codes, if you will, or communities that are adjacent to or subject to these contaminant environments tend to be minority and working class Americans. Is that correct, if I remember correctly?
A very, very big disproportionate group of folks like that live in those communities, yes.
And so the reason it's an issue, I just want to be very clear on our show today. The reason it's an issue is because many times, because of that fact, there are many folks, unfortunately, in our country who don't consider it a very major and important issue because that's just not how they prioritize their values.
Well, look, when you're barely getting by, Mo, and you have you have no choice but to live in these communities.
Right.
What are you going to prioritize?
Yeah. Exactly.
Insulin or climate change.
And until we get the folks who aren't in those communities just as concerned about their fellow Americans who may not be as blessed and fortunate as they are, we're going to continue to have these challenges. But I'm so happy to hear that legislation like this has now passed and that will be codified. And we will now raise the prioritization of those Americans who frankly should have been loved and respected and included all along. You and I, of course, have spent our careers fighting for that equality and that advocacy, but maybe now some others will join us.
And if business people look at this, they'll say, well, we're making these investments, and if they lower the healthcare costs on folks that are living in these communities, isn't that benefit everybody? And so, I think there are many benefits to this, not just what we've talked about here today.
So that's a great way to end our time together, I think, is that there are ancillary benefits that we will see pouring out of this initiative for, as you said to us, decades to come. And I don't even know that we can name all of the ancillary benefits because there may be ancillary benefits we're not even aware of. Is that a fair assessment?
For sure. Absolutely.
So it's always so great to have you on. You're a genius and you're brilliant and you're an expert at what you do and what you know. But I'll tell you what makes you even more brilliant to me is that your ability, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, you have this uncanny ability to describe it, define it, explain it in a manner that we can all understand. And that makes you special because there are many people who describe these things in such a heady and Harvard-esque way. That most of us are like, I'm not sure what the hell he just said. You are the opposite. And we thank you so much for being with us again. And you are welcomed here anytime. In fact, we'll have you back to do like a Where Are We Now?
I'd love to.
Thank you, Tim Zenk.
Thanks, Mo. See ya.
Success and Godspeed. And thank you to Mark and Leslie. Another great show. Thank you all for being with us.